Welcome to Monarch's Leadership AICast, where we partner with Google's Notebook LM,
to bring you the insights of our IO and leadership experts.
an easy-to-digest AI-generated podcast. And just so you know, all of our podcasts are reviewed by the Monarch team.
To make sure everything is accurate.
Today we're taking a deep dive into a topic that's, well, it's practically guaranteed to make anyone nervous. Performance reviews. But don't worry.
We're going to be looking at two excellent articles from Monarch's blog.
How to create a performance review system that actually works.
And how to make performance reviews bearable.
To change your perspective on performance reviews and show you how they can become a valuable tool for growth.
It's fascinating how performance reviews have gotten this reputation, for being such a drag. When they have the potential to be so impactful, when done correctly, performance reviews can actually become a driver for growth, help everyone get on the same page, and even boost engagement across a company.
Yeah, I think we've all been there. You know that feeling of dread as performance review season approaches?
Yeah.
But what you're saying, it makes me think that maybe it doesn't have to be that way.
Definitely not. A lot of the anxiety surrounding performance reviews comes from the fact that both sides, managers and employees, often approach reviews with a lot of apprehension. Managers are often nervous about delivering feedback, especially if it isn't all sunshine and roses, while employees can get defensive if they feel the review is unfair or doesn't accurately reflect the work they've done.
It's almost like there's this tension already there before the conversation even begins. One thing that really stood out to me in the How to Create a Performance Review System That Actually Works article is the idea that companies need to make sure their performance review systems are actually supporting their larger goals. Why is that such an important starting point?
That's such a key point. When you think about it, performance reviews should never be treated as something separate from the rest of the company. They need to be directly connected to the company's overall strategy. Imagine a tech startup let's say the next big social media platform. Their review system should be rewarding employees who are willing to experiment and try new things. Even if those experiments don't always work out, that's how you get the next big breakthrough.
I can see how that approach would help employees feel like their work is connected to something bigger than themselves.
Exactly. When employees can clearly see how their individual goals connect to the company's mission and success, you can see significant improvements in both engagement and performance. In fact, Monarch's own organizational health and effectiveness profile survey shows that companies that are good at making this link clear, they often outperform others when it comes to employee well-being and engagement. Plus, there's research from McKinsey showing that this connection also helps employees see the performance management system as fair, and getting employees on board with the system is a lot easier when they believe it's fair.
So we're really talking about creating a system that benefits everyone, not just ticking boxes and meeting deadlines. Something else I found interesting in that article was the focus on the future. Instead of just dwelling on the past, it's about using the review to plan for what's next.
Right. It's about taking that future-oriented approach and using the performance review as a way to prepare. That could mean encouraging employees to continuously upskill, or identifying talented individuals who could be promoted or moved to different areas within the organization. That kind of forward thinking makes a company so much more adaptable and agile when it comes to dealing with change. And this actually relates back to one of the biggest concerns employees have when it comes to performance development, which we've seen in Monarch's organizational health and engagement profile. Employees want to understand what the next step in their career is and how to get there. Taking a future-focused approach in performance reviews lets companies directly address those concerns.
That makes so much sense. Instead of just judging past performance, you're actually using the review to plan for the future. That's a lot more empowering for everyone involved. Let's be honest, though, even with the best intentions, performance reviews can still be pretty stressful, which is where the second article, How to Make Performance Reviews Bearable, comes in.
Right. And one of the most important things highlighted in this article is the need to shift our mindset away from thinking of performance reviews as a dreaded annual event. It encourages managers to be more flexible, which could mean being open to changing review times so they work for both their own schedules and the schedules of their employees. This can actually help everyone come into the review with a more positive outlook.
I can definitely see how that would help.
Yeah.
I mean, having a review when you're already stressed and overwhelmed isn't exactly a recipe for a productive conversation.
Exactly. Another really important point the article raises is the idea of making the review a two-way dialogue. rather than a one-sided lecture. Managers need to be actively listening to their employees, giving them a chance to share their perspectives, and really making the review into a collaborative conversation. This not only helps everyone understand each other better, but also makes the employees feel heard and respected, which in turn can make them more open to feedback.
I really like how the article talks about the importance of practice when it comes to giving feedback effectively. And I have to say, Monarch's AI roleplay feature, seems like it could be a total game changer in this area.
It really is a fantastic tool. AIRI gives managers a safe space to practice having those feedback conversations. That can sometimes be really tough. They can get real-time recommendations on how they can improve their delivery, experiment with different ways of approaching things, and in the end, build the confidence they need to have those conversations effectively in real life. Imagine using AIR to rehearse a challenging conversation with a top performer who's become complacent. You can test out different approaches and see how they react virtually before having that crucial real-life talk.
And what's really cool is that AIR lets you choose whether you want to interact through chat or live call. So whether you're someone who likes to carefully craft each response, or you're someone who prefers to practice in a way that feels more like a real-time conversation, there's an option that will work for you.
Yes, and another crucial element is being specific.
That's interesting. Can you tell me more about that?
The article really emphasizes that feedback that's too general just isn't helpful. Instead of saying something like, you need to be more organized, effective feedback uses concrete examples. It might be something like, during that caster project, you missed an important deadline, and that had an impact on the rest of the team. This type of feedback makes it a lot clearer for the employee to understand what they need to work on.
It's like the difference between telling someone you need to clean your room and saying, please hang up your clothes and make your bed. One is vague and leaves a lot open to interpretation, while the other clearly lays out what needs to be done.
Exactly. And by connecting the feedback to the specific outcomes, you can really highlight why the issue matters. So instead of just telling someone they were disorganized, you could explain how their disorganization led to the team having to work late or caused a project to be delayed. This helps employees understand the real impact of their actions. And it also makes the feedback feel more relevant.
It's all about making those connections and showing the bigger picture. One thing I've noticed is that both articles we're looking at today really stress the importance of continuous feedback. Why is it so important to move away from that traditional annual review model?
It really boils down to this. Waiting a whole year to give someone feedback on their performance just isn't effective. People need more frequent feedback if they're going to learn and grow.
It's kind of like trying to steer a ship back on course after it's already been sailing in the wrong direction for a year.
By that point, a lot of damage has already been done. Continuous feedback through reviews that happen more frequently, say every quarter or twice a year, gives everyone a chance to make adjustments along the way. And having regular one-on-one meetings is a big part of that. These meetings create a space for managers and employees to connect, talk about progress, deal with any challenges that come up, and celebrate successes together.
I can see how, especially when people are working remotely or in hybrid environments, those regular check-ins become even more essential.
They really are crucial for maintaining a connection and making sure everyone is on the same page. And technology can actually play a big role in supporting this ongoing feedback process. For example, Monark has a 1.1 meeting tool that's currently in development. And this tool will use AI to take notes and even generate monthly reports from those conversations.
So it's almost like having a built-in memory bank for all of those important conversations.
Exactly. It takes away a lot of the stress of trying to remember everything. For anyone who wants some extra guidance on how to get the most out of their one-on-ones, Monarch has a really great blog post called Leading Through Conversation that's full of helpful tips. Speaking of helpful resources, both articles we're looking at today really emphasize how important it is for managers to receive proper training when it comes to delivering feedback.
Makes sense. So what would you say is the most valuable type of training for managers in this area?
Well, it all starts with training on the specific performance review system that the organization uses. This helps ensure that all the managers understand the system in the same way, that they apply it consistently, and that the process is seen as fair by the employees.
Yeah, consistency is definitely key.
Absolutely. But it's about more than just understanding the mechanics of the system. Managers also need training on how to deliver feedback in a way that's constructive, specific, and focuses on an employee's strengths rather than their weaknesses. This means getting good at things like active listening, providing clear examples, and framing feedback in a way that encourages growth instead of making people feel discouraged.
It's about changing the focus from criticism to development. Does Monarch recommend any specific training resources for this?
We do. Monarch offers a number of really great courses that can help managers develop these critical skills. Some fantastic options include leading high-achieving teams, communicating, negotiating, and resolving conflict, and building trust in relationships.
Those sound really valuable. So we've talked about setting clear goals, encouraging autonomy, moving away from that annual review, practicing good communication, giving specific examples, providing feedback throughout the year, and investing in manager training. But how do we know if any of this is actually working?
That's such a great question. Just putting a performance review system in place and hoping for the best isn't enough. We need to be constantly evaluating how effective the system is and be willing to make adjustments as we go.
So what are some of the key questions we should be asking?
The most important question is whether we're actually meeting the goals we set for the system in the first place. Were we hoping to increase employee engagement, improve communication, or create a culture of continuous feedback? And if those were our goals, are we actually seeing those results?
It all goes back to those initial goals.
It absolutely does. And it's just as important to get feedback from both the employees and the managers. What's working for them, what isn't? What would they like to see changed?
I think it can be really valuable to get an outside perspective on something like this.
Absolutely. This is an area where Monarch can really help by providing unbiased feedback and insights. We can assist organizations in designing surveys, analyzing data, and pinpointing areas where things could be improved.
So it's about using data to guide our evaluation of the system's effectiveness.
Precisely. And it's also helpful to look at other metrics, such as turnover rates, employee engagement scores, and promotion rates. These can provide additional insights into the impact of the system.
It's about looking at the big picture and seeing if the system is actually helping us move in the right direction.
Exactly.
Well, this has been a really insightful deep dive into the world of performance reviews. I have to say, I'm already feeling a lot more optimistic about the whole process.
Me too. It's all about shifting our perspective from dread to development. The big takeaway is that performance reviews, when done correctly, can be a very powerful tool for growth and development, not just for individuals, but for the organization as a whole.
I love that. Before we wrap things up for today, I want to remind everyone that Monarch is hosting a panel on performance development this February. Be sure to keep an eye out for more information on that. It's going to be an amazing event.
It really is.
We'll be back soon with part 2 of our deep dive on performance reviews, where we'll be focusing on strategies for making the most of the review conversation itself.
Welcome back to Monarch's Leadership AICast,
We're picking up our deep dive right where we left off,
exploring how to shift those dreaded performance reviews
into meaningful conversations,
Last time, we talked about creating a foundation for success
both from the company side.
and the manager's perspective.
This time,
Let's really get into the details of the review conversation itself.
okay, so let's say I'm a manager about to sit down with an employee for their review. What are some practical tips for creating a positive and productive environment for that conversation?
One of the most important things to remember is that this is a conversation, not a monologue. It's about building a space where both you and the employee feel comfortable sharing your perspectives openly.
So starting off with the right tone is really crucial.
Absolutely. It's helpful to begin by acknowledging the employee's contributions and expressing your appreciation for their work. This helps set a positive tone for the rest of the conversation.
It's like you're saying, hey, I see you, I value you, and I want this to be helpful for both of us.
Exactly. It's about making it clear that this is a collaborative process, not about passing judgment. And it's important to pay attention to your body language, too. Make eye contact. Maintain an open posture. And avoid distractions like checking your phone or email. Those small cues can actually make a big difference in how the employee perceives the conversation.
You're right. It's about being present and showing the employee that you're fully invested in the conversation. So when it comes to giving feedback, how can we make sure it's actually helpful?
It's really important to focus on specific behaviors and provide concrete examples, rather than just making general statements.
So instead of saying something like, you need to be more proactive, it would be better to say something like, I've noticed that you haven't been contributing ideas during our team meetings lately. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
That's a perfect example. By giving specific examples, you're giving the employees something tangible to think about and work with.
And it also keeps them from getting defensive. Because you're talking about specific behaviors. You're not attacking their character.
Exactly. And whenever possible, try to frame your feedback in a way that focuses on the impact of those behaviors.
Can you give me an example of what that might sound like?
Sure. Let's say an employee has a habit of showing up late to meetings. Instead of just saying, you're always late, You could say, when you arrive late to meetings, it disrupts the flow of our conversation and makes other team members feel like their time isn't being respected.
Ah, so you're connecting the behavior to its consequences, which makes it much more impactful.
Exactly. And it helps the employee understand why it's important to change that behavior. Now, what about those times when the feedback isn't all positive? How do we deliver constructive criticism without demoralizing the employee?
That's a really good question. It can be tough to find that balance.
Well, that's where the sandwiching technique comes in handy.
Sandwiching. Tell me more about that.
It's a technique where you start by acknowledging something positive about the employee's performance. Then you deliver the constructive criticism, and then you finish up with another positive point.
So it's like making a feedback sandwich, with the constructive criticism sandwiched between two slices of positive reinforcement.
Exactly. This approach can help soften the impact of the criticism and make the employee more receptive to hearing it.
It's like you're saying, hey, I see the great things you're doing in these areas, and if we can also work on this one area, you'll be even more amazing.
That's a great way to put it. And remember, even when you're giving constructive criticism, it's crucial to be respectful and maintain a supportive tone. Avoid using accusatory language or making personal attacks.
Right. It's about focusing on the behavior, not the person. I think it's also really important to remember to ask the employee for their perspective on the feedback you've given.
Absolutely. Turning the review into a true dialogue is so important.
It gives the employee a chance to share their side of the story, which can be so valuable in finding solutions together.
I completely agree. And that brings us to another really important part of the performance review conversation: setting clear expectations for the future.
That's a great point. Let's talk about that. What are some good ways to set expectations that are both challenging and attainable?
One of the best things you can do is involve the employee in the goal-setting process.
So it's not just me as the manager dictating what the employee needs to achieve.
Exactly. When employees have a voice in setting their own goals, they're much more likely to be motivated to achieve them.
It makes sense. It gives them a sense of ownership and agency over their work. How can we make sure those goals are well defined?
That's where that classic SMART goals framework comes in. Making sure goals are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound.
Right. It's that classic framework, but it's so important.
It really is. Vague goals like be more productive are really hard to track and measure. But a SMART goal, something like increase sales by 10% in the next quarter, gives everyone a clear target to work towards.
And it makes it so much easier to track progress and make adjustments along the way.
Exactly. And another good practice is to document those goals and expectations in writing, so that both you and the employee have something to refer back to.
It's like creating a roadmap for success.
Exactly. And don't forget to schedule regular check-ins to discuss progress, work through any challenges that come up, and provide ongoing support.
Those continuous feedback loops are so valuable.
They really are. And it's important to remember that the performance review conversation doesn't end when you walk out of the room. It's an ongoing process that requires commitment from both the manager and the employee.
I love that. It's a journey, not a destination.
You got it.
We've covered a lot of ground today. From setting the right tone for the review conversation, to giving feedback effectively, to setting clear expectations for the future. Do you have any final thoughts or advice for our listeners who might be feeling a little overwhelmed by all of this?
I would say don't feel like you have to implement everything all at once. Start by focusing on one or two areas you want to improve,
Right.
and then gradually incorporate more strategies as you become more comfortable.
That's great advice. Small changes can make a big difference.
Absolutely. And remember, when approached with the right mindset and with the right tools, performance reviews can actually be a really positive experience for both managers and employees.
They can be an opportunity for growth, development, and for building stronger relationships.
Exactly.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into performance reviews. We hope you found it insightful and empowering. See you next time on Monarch's Leadership AI Cast.